What's the plot hole in a movie you just can't get over? Definitely the Ant-Man movies. The guy still weighs 200 pounds when he shrinks, and they acknowledge that the first time he uses a suit launching out of a tub and cracking a floor tile. Then no more than 10 seconds later he breaks through drywall because he's so small and heavy, but then lands on a record player like he weighs nothing. To add a few more examples, a shrunken tank on a keychain, and shrinking down a building in the second movie and just wheeling it around. I've never seen a movie establish something and then contradict itself so quickly. I've seen people talk about this a few times in other threads, and the consensus always seems to be because PM particles. Like, apparently even or perhaps especially in the comics, PM particles were always wildly inconsistent and were used as a magic bullet solution to everything, so it's true to the source material, if nothing else. I call it count the coats. I've been watching a lot of Hallmark movies to get my mind off the news, and I've noticed that whenever the girl goes back to her hometown or gets stranded in a cute little town over Christmas, she arrives with a small roll-around travel bag, and yet as the story progresses, she is seen wearing multiple different long wool and puffer coats and various pairs of boots. She would have needed a van to transport the amount of clothing she seems to have. One could almost make a drinking game out of it. That in every Christmas movie, where Santa is real and the adults are portrayed as non-believers in Santa, none of them question where the gifts come from on Christmas morning. 8 million forms of communication and 3PO doesn't speak Jora? Okay, this is the best one I've seen so far. Anakin literally lives on Tatooine. And even if 3PO does understand, he doesn't say anything about it. In the Phantom Menace novelization there is a scene where Watto sends Anakin to trade with some Jawas for droids. Anakin brings an unfinished C-3PO with him because C-3PO can understand their language and can let Anakin know if they're trying to cheat him. During the meeting, C-3PO figures out that the Jawas are keeping their best droids inside their sandcrawler and Anakin is able to barter for some of them. Not sure if novelizations are canon, but that book definitely establishes that C-3PO can understand Jawas. There is a scene in The Notebook where a sign can be seen in a store window in Seabrook. The sign reads 3 peaches for $1. Now, I want to know one goddamn thing. What freaking peaches cost 33 cents a piece in 1940 South Carolina, nearly the epicenter of peach production? Peaches made of gold? 3 peaches for $1 in that time and place is highway robbery. FCK that. Batman Begins with the device that evaporates all the water in Gotham City. It would evaporate the people too, or at least turn them into human prunes. Karate Kid. Mr. Miyagi sneaks Daniel into the tournament last minute because they didn't actually register, and he even steals a black belt to fake his credentials. Yet the tournament bracket has a Miyagi Dojo banner, complete with graphics and everything. Miyagi and the tournament organizers and the owners of the Cobra Kai Dojo were all just conspiring to bet on little kids beating the crap out of each other. Still don't know why the aliens in Signs came to a planet that's mostly water inhabited by animals that are mostly water, where water will randomly fall from the sky when their only weakness is water. The movie is a lot better if you subscribe to the theory that the aliens are actually demons. It actually makes a lot of sense. It all starts to happen after the protagonist loses his faith. House is literally attacked right after he refused to pray over supper. We never see the spaceships the aliens came in. The closest thing is 2 glowing lights in the sky, which a bird flies into and falls, as if it hit something solid. Birds falling from the sky is a biblical sign of the apocalypse. The daughter is repeatedly referred to as an angel, and the water that hurts the aliens is water she drank from, making it holy water if she is literally an angel. And then the most religious region in the world, the Middle East, the birthplace of the Abrahamic religions, is the place specifically mentioned on the radio as having discovered a way to fight the invaders. I mean, it's all bullshit and it's just a shooty movie that doesn't hold up to repeated viewings because Shyamalan was in the middle of his everything must have a twist phase, but it's fun to think about. In the day after tomorrow they leave their building to go get a guy's brother from boarding school. Brother is never mentioned again, and the movie ends with no idea if the brother is dead or alive. Huge plot hole that could have been cleared up by adding or subtracting a sentence or two. Also, when they're in the library, they're burning books instead of the tables and chairs that fill the room, all while having a moral conundrum about burning said books. There's a number of them in the Goonies, but it always bothered me that when Mouth was translating Spanish from the map, he used a British accent and the poem rhymed in English. Tim Burton's Sweeney Todd. How about a literal hole? There is a chair that mechanically dumps the bodies of his victims down a shaft into the basement. The trouble is, there is an exterior shot of Mrs. Lovett's pie shop where you can clearly see that the chair on the second floor is directly above the open room of the bakery. No hole or shaft is possible from this view. Drives me up the wall for an otherwise great flick. Generally not a fan of musicals. Came here to say this. The chair should be dumping the bodies right through the crowded restaurant. I've seen this movie like 60 times, so it hasn't quite ruined it for me, though. Both stagings I've seen of Sweeney Todd have the building arranged differently so that the bodies, won't go right through the middle of the pie shop. In the last Harry Potter movie, he never fixes his goddamn wand with the Elder Wand. I just dug. How could you miss that, Mr. Director? That was such a huge symbolic moment in the books. How could you forget it? Unbreakable. How does the lead character go his whole life not realizing he can't be hurt, or that he's super strong? Did doctors never try to give him a shot, or do a blood test? And as a guy that was involved in sports, he never tried lifting heavier and heavier weights? That's like a fundamental aspect of lifting weights. Threat level midnight. The president being revealed to be a bad guy in the movie, and then by the end of the movie he is a good guy again with no explanation. I get pissed off by what I call plot stupidity, and I see it all the time in movies and television. For example, an FBI agent will put together a profile from thin air that somehow manages to identify the killer's home address and exactly where they are now. In the meantime, they've missed or ignored the most basic clues than any idiot watching has already picked up on halfway through the show or movie. In Mean Girls, Regina George handwrites the burn book, but pretends Caddy wrote it. Couldn't they tell by the handwriting that it wasn't her? When they do some impossible stuff and just say it's because of quantum mechanics. If we quantumize the atoms, rephase the lasers, and add some skdibskstanium, it should stabilize the protons in my quantum generator. Every scientist in a movie ever. It really bothers me that in various scenes in the Polar Express the train has a different amount of passenger cars. In the first Mitchell Bay Transformers, we find Megatron has been kept while unconscious in a government installation, and are given a full view of where everything is in the room he is kept in. When Megatron awakens, he, without moving his head or view from straight ahead, declares that he is Megatron and intimidating. Theirs is nothing straight in front of him. Everything that direction would be lower than eye level and out of his field of view. He introduces himself to a wall. In the Butterfly Effect, he goes back in time to elementary school to stab his hands so he could show the stigmata to his cellmate, thus convincing him to defend him from the other prisoners. Except if he had created the stigmata scars as a kid, then he'd have them his whole life, and it wouldn't be a miracle from the perspective of his cellmate. Otherwise that film is pretty damn good. I've posted about this before. Here's a copy paste from the last time. Rock-a-doodle. Chanticleer leaves the farm because the sun comes up without his crowing. Then, they need him back, because without his crowing, the sun won't rise. Sorry, what? It's got a pretty good voice cast. What? Between Phil Harris, Glenn Campbell, Eddie Deason and Christopher Plummer. But man, that plot hole's easily noticed by children I know that have seen it. Suicide Squad. They were gathering all these villains to do something, then got sidetracked with the witch, which was a part of the squad, but went rogue and became a threat. Like, what was the original thing they were all gathered to do? Did I miss something? I only saw the movie once, so I'm probably wrong about this, but I was under the impression they were forming the squad as a precautionary measure in case any more Superman type fellows showed up. But then it all went to shoot, as you might expect it would. Gremlins and time zones. Can't feed them after midnight, but it's always midnight somewhere. And when can you feed them? 6 PM is still technically after midnight every day. Beetlejuice is my favorite movie. I started watching it as a kid and watched it weekly through school, almost nightly all through high school. In the afterlife, every dead person looks just like they did when they died. Burned in a house fire, charred, choke on a chicken leg, blue-faced and bone still in throat. Get sliced in half. Your legs are now sentient. But wreck your car off a bridge and break your necks and drown. You look fine. As much as I love the movie and understand that they couldn't have the main characters deformed, I wish Uthi had somehow indicated and showed how they died. They're the only ones who don't look dead. Other than that, I've never watched a better movie. The fact that Scully and Mulder just came back from Antarctica all fine with no means of getting out. They didn't even explain that. WTF. There was a later episode of the series where some minor character asks about Antarctica. Long time since I watched it, but I seem to remember both Mulder and Scully ummed and ahed and then argued about what they saw or didn't see. My beloved Toy Story. When Buzz first appears as Andy's birthday gift, he believes that he is the Buzz Lightyear and not a toy. Well, that is all good, but why does Buzz freeze like all the other toys when a human comes around? It's probably hardwired into him, regardless of whether or not he believes it. He probably has no control over freezing. That or Buzz suffers from some form of mental illness that makes him think he is a superhero. His freezing is him trying to cope, but his super act is part of his denial. IDK. In the Hunger Games, both book and movie adaptations, when the careers run Katniss up a tree, they say, "Oh, let's wait until morning, it's not like she's going anywhere," and then proceed to light a campfire under the tree. Why don't they just light the tree on fire? It's such a small detail and I'm such a huge fan of the franchise, but I swear I facepalm every time I read or see it. If the tree is large enough that it can support her and have her be far enough away from the careers that they can't jump and grab her, it would probably take a long time to burn down that tree, especially if it's still alive. In The Incredibles 2, the Underminer just escapes at the beginning of the movie and is never spoken of again. Years of waiting for a sequel just so he could be forgotten and replaced by a more interesting villain. To add to this, Incredibles: Rise of the Underminer came out in 2005. It was a freaking awesome game. But the new movie completely trashed him and just let him get away. In Back to the Future, the fact that Marty's parents don't remember him getting them together. I'm willing to believe that they simply forgot what Marty looked like, even if they remembered him. He was only in 1955 for, what, less than a week. Even though he did get them together, I can still buy it given how little time he spent there, relatively speaking. US. These doubles are trapped in the motions of the people above constantly and are forced to do what the doubles do, but somehow they all just stop and decide to launch an attack. Because they're upset they were forced to live like that. If they had the freedom to escape and kill everyone, why didn't they just leave in the first place? Or at least not do whatever the people above ground were doing? Please, someone explain this movie to me, because it literally made no sense, but everyone loved it. So tell me what I'm missing here. Is there more information to come? IDK. There's a fun, intriguing mystery that makes you come back for more, and then there's the movie literally not supplying enough information for it to make sense. In Ocean's 11, spoiler warning, they leave the casino with those fake bags that are rigged to explode and filled with flowers for pronoun or whatever. Even though nobody brought them along. I thought the SWAT team that was actually them brought them in as their gear, and when they left with their same bags full of money no one had caught on at that point. Endgame. No Infinity Stones equals universe stops. Also Endgame. I use the stones to destroy the stones. I always understood it as if the stones don't exist in any form, the universe fails to exist as well. So once Thanos blew them apart, they still exist, but they're reduced to atoms and cannot be used. Die Hard 2. They hold the country at random by not communicating with the Atka traffic control. Then they land in a snowstorm after causing an accident. The whole premise of the movie makes me want to tear my hair out. When we rake off, we have a primary airport and a secondary airport in the flight plan, and by law we have to have 45 minutes of fuel after reaching the secondary airport. After arriving at New York and not hearing from ATC, planes would simply fly to their secondary airport because they are airplanes. Plus, adjusting the ILS instrument landing system to read 100 feet lower is impossible. Unless ATC had access to the physical controls in the seat pit, they can't do that. Not to mention the redundant onboard radar and independent instruments that say just how high you are. And if there is an accident, nobody is going to be landing there anytime soon. When 747s crashed at Tenerife, it took 7 days for flights to resume. Totally absurd. The Horizon. The ship becomes sentient and tries to kill the crew. The ship can hear them, so they go to the cargo hold to discuss their plan to destroy the ship. The ship hears everything except for that. Water is toxic/fatal to the aliens in Signs, but they wander around in Mel Gibson's cornfield at night. Have you ever walked through a cornfield at night? You come out soaked. Another one the new Star Trek movies are guilty of. A starship in orbit that suddenly loses power is going to remain in orbit for a really long time. It's not going to sink instantly into the atmosphere like a boat with a hole in it. In Sleepless in Seattle, Meg Ryan has a fiance she dumps on Valentine's Day for a guy she has never met. He is slightly disappointed but understands. Otherwise a great movie, but that does not make sense. Many witches and wizards claimed they only did house bidding under influence of the Imperious Curse, but how do you sort out the liars? Virid serum. Goddamn Virid serum, which can be brewed by freaking 11-year-old children, not that hard. You may thinking of the Polyjuice potion that's made by 11-year-olds. Veritaserum takes 6 months to stew and is extremely difficult to make, with a lot of hard to find ingredients. And as Harry proves, witches and wizards of strong mind can fool it. That Jurassic Park movie, where they show the oldest of the two brothers being unfaithful to his GF, but the movie never comes back to it all. Why even put that in there in the first place? It's like they loaded Chekhov's gun and just left it there for a kid to find it and shoot himself in the foot by accident. Snowpiercer, when Curtis finds out that the protein bars are made of bugs and is disgusted. But later we learn that Curtis had personally eaten human limbs and babies. So why is he so disgusted? I get fury at the greed of the rich, while the poor are made to eat roaches, but has eaten babies. I think about this constantly. I don't care if there are other, more glaring plot holes to the movie. I just can't wrap my head around the thought process here. In The Quiet Place, that whole movie is stupid. Why don't they live by the waterfall? Why not have car alarms and shoot going off to keep them away? How about a giant loudspeaker somewhere then, when they all show up, blast them into oblivion? Just dumb.